Sup, Internet world? It's Wyatt here, reporting to you from Savannah Studios here in sunny Los Angeles, California. If you don't know, I make videos on mixing, mastering, songwriting, producing, all the above. These are all things you can learn on your own and do in a home studio. Today's video is about drum machines, specifically how to treat drum machines within a mix. You know, drum machines can be monotonous and they can be stale right out of the box, right out of the bag, whatever, if you're using a hardware drum machine or a software drum machine. In this case, I used a software drum machine and a very stale sounding drum machine, which is the kind of the sound I wanted to go for, but it wasn't producing the bite that I wanted it to originally. So let's jump into Pro Tools and I'll show you how I've been manipulating and mixing drum machines within a project. Let's go, folks. Howdy, folks. We are inside of the infamous Pro Tools. This is a new song that I'm working on under the name Boy Carter featuring Sugar Bay. It's kind of more of a pop type project that I'm doing, more electronic type music. And so I thought I would make a video explaining how I mix drum machines, how I mix digital drums, drum machines, programmed drums, things of that nature. This song, I used a plugin, a free plugin. I'm forgetting what the company is, but it's a Lin drum machine copy. It's all digital. It's a drum machine, and the entire song is programmed, which right out of the box can be monotonous. And it's hard to sculpt a drum machine and kind of manufacture it to have the exact characteristics you want and the exact punch you want and to really have control over the kit. So I'm going to show you how I'm treating this song. Let me play you the song so you can get an understanding of what's going on. Okay, so you get kind of a vibe for the song. I'm going to solo out the drums so you can hear just what the drums sound like on their own. Now, granted, I don't mix drums singularly without any sort of reference to other instruments within the mix. I'm always doing static type mixes and listening to how the drums sound compared, in line with the bass, the synth, the vocal, all that. But I'll just show you kind of where the drums landed on their own, and we'll break it down from there. Really simple pattern. It's kind of disco inspired. I recorded this in a different program, and I stemmed out the drum machine into kick, snare, hi-hat, which I think is really all I had on a clap track. And I basically separated the tracks, and from there, as you can see with the kick drum, we're going to start there with the kick. I don't know what you call this type of processing. I learned it from Eric Valentine. I guess it's sort of like parallel processing, but it's a little different in the sense where it's not compression necessarily. It's more parallel tone shaping. So this is the kick drum right out of the drum machine. Let me bypass all these plugins really quick so you can see what's going on here. So that is the raw kick drum, okay? So what I did is I duplicated in Pro Tools. You can literally can track duplicate, which it basically copies the track exactly, and it will copy any plugins you have, all that stuff. I made a duplicate, and I basically tone shaped it to be really resonant with these sub frequencies. I felt like the original kick drum wasn't reaching as low as I wanted. So I put this EQ on the kick drum, which I will solo out the sub kick here. What I'll do is I'll sweep around the sub frequencies until I find where it's hitting the hardest, where it feels right. I guess it was 56 hertz on this song. I'll show you what the sub kick sounds like. This is a duplicate with just this EQ on it. You probably won't tell. You probably won't tell on headphones. If you're listening with studio headphones or you're listening on monitors, you'll definitely hear it reaching the ground. So I'm really emphasizing that like 56, 60 hertz area with the sub kick, and I am basically blending the two of these together into a master kick bus, which is an aux send in Pro Tools. And I do the same thing with the snare drum. As you can tell, I actually duplicated the snare three times, and those are all going into a snare bus. The other aspects of the kit are all also feeding into a master drum bus, which these buses feed to, if that makes any sense. That drum bus is linked to a drum reverb send that, as you can see here, I automate in on the choruses and out on the verses. So that, in a nutshell, is what I did. Processing is a whole other story. In terms of setting up drums, I've been really into this kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, this pattern, I guess, of subgrouping the major components of the drum set, like the kick drum, snare drum, toms, not necessarily on ambient mics like room mics or overheads. I don't think there's a necessity for that. And really being able to pinpoint tonally what you want to have control of. With the kick drum on this song, the original kick drum here, there's a lot of attack, there's a lot of punch, and I love that about it. I'm using that as basically an attack fader, and I'm using this sub kick duplicate as a sub kick fader, if that makes any sense. So when I get the balance to a nice symbiotic state, then I just rely on this kick bus to kind of feed the level into the entire drum bus in the song. Okay? So if you don't know, this plugin Saturn's amazing. It's basically a multi-band distortion plugin, and it sounds really great on close mic'd instruments, percussion, drums, bass actually sounds really good with the bass DI. So I have this as the first plugin, and I'll show you what that's doing. And I'm just going to solo the raw kick for now. I'm going to put it in bypass. So you could tell what it's doing is it's adding, it kind of splatters the mid-range in a really musical way to me. It adds a lot of attack without it sounding really clicky. It brightens up the beater sound. in a nutshell, that's what I'm getting out of this plugin. I love it on kick drums. From there, I'm sculpting a little more EQ. I'm pulling out some like uber sub frequencies because I don't want a lot of competition between this and the sub kick mic that I have going on. And I felt, there's a little boxiness in the 300, 294 area that I pulled out. It's nothing crazy there. From there, I have it hitting a DBX 160 compressor. I'll show you what that sounds like. It's really subtle. The goal with this compressor is to add a little more sustain to the low end tail, not to have it be so sharp. And the DBX, all these DBX style compressors are really good at that. And from there, I'm using transient shaper, adding a little bit of attack, and that's it. Also, very subtle. All these things are very subtle, and they add up accumulatively. The sub kick, you're going to tell, is very similar processing. The thing with using a multi-band plugin, it could be a multi-band compressor, multi-band EQ, multi-band distortion in this sense. You have to duplicate the exact same frequencies, or else you're going to get phasing issues. It's a little easier to bypass that if you're using electronic drums, but on a real drum kit, you got to be wary of using multi-band processing and making sure that you're aligning the frequencies the exact same way. So with the sub kick, I'm duplicated that. As you can tell, I took out a lot of the thuddy boxiness of the kick, which isn't necessarily bad, but I didn't want this competing with this other kick bus, and it's all low end sub frequency punch. I have the same compressor hitting it, and I have the same transient shaper hitting it, and together it sounds like this. On the kick bus, I have decapitator, really lightly. I mean, it's subtle. It just adds a little more bite to the kick sound. I'll show you what that sounds like in and out. And bypass. In. Now you could argue the fact that it may sound better with it in bypass, but in the song, that little tail of distortion at the end there, when the compressor is letting off, it helps pop the kick drum through the mix just that little tiny bit. So that's why I have it engaged. From there, it's hitting. This is the Slate Red Compressor, which is a great kick drum compressor. Really subtle as well. All it's doing is kind of marrying that sub kick and the original kick sound together, and it's tightening the sub frequencies just a little bit. That's why I don't have the high pass engaged. It should only really be hitting like 1-2 dB of compression, and its goal is to just tighten up the low end just a hair. And here it is in bypass. Okay, so long story short, kick drum, duplicate it. It depends on the kick track. If it's an 808, for instance, I don't know if I would do a sub duplicate. I probably would do more of a mid-range duplicate, or and that depends on the 808 sound. But if you're wanting more control over a certain frequency range of a track, my suggestion would be, instead of crowding your EQ on that one track and trying to carve your way to perfection, just duplicate it and hype the frequency that you want to hear more of and blend it in. It's like parallel EQ. if you want to put it that way. But you can spread this out. You can duplicate something 4, 5, 6 times if you wanted to. So on the kick drum, that's what's going on. It's feeding the kick bus, which goes to the drum bus. The snare drum is a very similar process. Let me show you what the snare sounds like completely raw. That way you can see what's going on. So pretty standard kind of soda can sounding snare drum. What I wanted to accomplish with the multi-processing here and the bussing was to have it sound more aggressive, more bitey, more barky. So, I have a similar setup here. As you can tell, the crossover point that I'm using in this song is 650 hertz. I'm making sure that's the same throughout the drum bus because, like I said before, the phasing will become a thing. So I just did this to taste. I threw this SSL style EQ, which is basically just giving it some top end. I think this is the stock, 7.5 hertz. This is a console emulation. I don't really know if it's doing much. Sometimes I think on snare drums it helps the transient. For drum machines at least sound a little more natural. I don't know if it overdrives or I don't know what it does internally. But I have this on, I'm basically, I'm boosting 5.5 hertz on the top end and I'm rolling off like the uber high end, it's 16K, but I'm giving it a little bit of a bump, at 10K going down just because I felt like the build up around 10K was really nice on the snare drum. I just didn't need anything past it. So I duplicated the snare track to what I called a snare mids track, which is essentially, the mid-range punch, the barkiness that I'm kind of searching for. Very similar setup, right? Got the Saturn. I'm just using this channel emulation. I have a very wacky EQ that is hyping the frequency points that I thought would be a great additive to the snare drum. And I'm actually running it through a SansAmp plugin, which is a virtual amp plugin that comes stock with Pro Tools. Yet again, it's really great for hyping up mid-range and adding some aggression to drums, to vocals, anything really. The SansAmp's great. So let me show you what just the SansAmp sounds like. So that's the snare mids, okay? And then I have a snare lows, which is basically doing what it says it's doing. I'm basically duplicating this plugin so the phase stays in line with each other. I also like what it does to the transient. I like what it does to the mid-range. As you could tell, every snare drum, and I'm going to probably do a separate video on snare drum fundamental, ways to treat a snare drum. But every snare drum has a resonant frequency, a fundamental frequency that it takes reign over. Typically, that's between 100 and 200 hertz. That's where the thud and the body of the snare drum lives. Every snare is different. The higher the tuning, you could get up into like the 250, 300 range. The lower the tuning, it could get down to like 80 hertz. So it depends on the snare. This snare was hitting 160. And you can see on the graph, I'll show you, you can actually visually see the fundamental note. And it goes against what everyone will tell you is to not use your eyes when you're mixing, but this is one example of a way you can use your eyes that will help you immensely. So I'll show you that when I play the snare lows, but this is where the fundamental frequency was, and so I'm boosting it up like a motherfucker because I want control of how much body the drum has. From there, I just have a transient shaper, adding a little bit of attack. I don't compress my snare drums. I just don't do that. To me, it kills all the beautiful transient attack that a drum has. I'm going to make another video in the future about why you should not compress your snare drums, but that aside, as you can tell, no compression on the snare drum. This is what the snare lows sounds like. Okay, so that's, we have the 3 snares combined. It's basically feeding into a decapitator, which is, it's just running signal through it, basically. And that's all on the snare bus. I have a reverb that is being automated in and out of the song. It's very light. It's at, I think the mix knob has at 2%. It's more of EQ lift, little bit of space when the chorus hits. So that probably won't be engaged this section of the song. Anywho, let's hear what the snare sounds like all together with all 3. Let's throw the kick drum in. So, kick drum, snare drum, a lot more bite, a lot more aggression. The clap track that I have in here, I didn't do much to. I added some really whacked out EQ here. I added a little bit of reverb. And with percussion and stuff, I like having the reverb plug-in on the track. I think it does something different. I'm not sure how to explain it. This looks like I was trying to gate it, but I don't think I used it. So here's what it sounds like with the clap track. And I'm pretty sure that was a loop that came with the drum machine plugin that I had that I thought was kind of funky, and I just looped it and kind of kept it there. I really just, I shaped it a little bit with the EQ, added some reverb. Hi-hats is, look, very simple, filtering the same kind of Saturn, like the distortion on the hi-hat, and a transient shaper. No compressor or anything like that. So I'm pretty sure I have this. Yeah, I have the hi-hat panned all the way left. What I did was I panned the hi-hat all the way left, and then there's a shaker that's on the upbeat. It's basically on the opposite side. It's all on the right, as you can tell. And it's similarly processed, some filtering, so a little bit of added distortion and transient shaping. And so you end up with something like this. That all feeds to a drum bus. All this other stuff too is just ear candy stuff. There's some sparkly noises, some disco drops. There's another clap track on the choruses. I'm not going to go too heady into the production of the song. I might do that when the song is released, if that's something you guys want. For now, it's just more of the processing of the major pieces of a drum machine. Like I said, bust the individual components out and duplicate what you feel you need to add more of. If that's EQ, dynamics, space, and effects, you can have complete control of every aspect of it. In terms of the drum bus, I can show you, it's hitting this virtual tape machine. There's a little mid-range bump on the whole kit, which actually was a really vital part. It was a really important part of the shaping of the drum kit. It's hitting a Pultec EQ, a little bit of high end, a little bit of low end shaping. It's hitting the distressor, which is the drum bus compressor I'm using. As you could tell, I'm using it in parallel. I basically have it slammed, and then I'm backing off between the wet and dry signal to where it feels right. I'll show you what that sounds like. With drum machines, you don't need as much. The drums are already so compressed. All I'm trying to do is extend the decay of the kit. And I feel like with the hi-hats, it added a little more of that pump. From there, it's hitting a virtual channel. And then it's hitting the decapitator on the way out. All of this feeds into a drum reverb, which is right here, which I'm using this Slate Realistic Drum Room, and I'm filtering that out, and is automated in the choruses. So, in a nutshell, that's how I would go about processing a drum machine, and how I did with this song that's going to be coming out soon. It's not a super complicated song, mostly keyboards and drums. There's one guitar in there, there's a piano in there. And I felt like the drums really needed to take control of the very mid-range of the song. So that's why I did a lot of mid-range shaping. If you have any questions, hit me up. Check out my website, wyattblair.com. If you have any questions with mixes or how to do certain things, or any requests for certain videos, just let me know. And have a good day.